There is a reason that people say you don't want to catch a federal case. If you have a federal case, the feds bring you in, you've been indicted. More often than not, I mean, what did you say the number?
95% of the time.
They're gonna get you. You're gonna be convicted of something.
They have,
and that's what Diddy is facing.
Unlimited resources. It is hard to match that if you are a defendant in a case.
But it has been done, as we told you at the beginning of the show.
John DeLorean case.
John DeLorean did. So it can be done, but can it be done in this particular case? We said that Diddy has incredible resources that will help, but if the case is as strong as it appears at this point, or at least as the feds have presented it, you would think there's no chance. But maybe they're not presenting exactly what they have at this point.
Well, the thing is, it's usually, in terms of public perception, the strongest the day the indictment comes out because you haven't heard the defense.
Huh. All right. Well, what can we expect from the federal case? Are there holes in it? Joining us now is Jason Swergold. He is a former assistant U.S. attorney, actually in SDNY, and he is joining us now. Jason, welcome to TMZ Live.
Hey, Jason.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Oh, we so appreciate it. The first thing I want to ask you, we had a documentary drop last week on the indictment of Diddy, and one of the things the lawyer told us, the lawyer representing Diddy, is that he believes that the prosecution does not have their ducks in a row yet, and they're still investigating. So he's moving to get this trial done as quickly as possible, thinking that he might have an advantage if they're not ready. To that, you say what?
I would say two things to that. First of all, I don't think SDNY in particular rushes in their indictments. As you know, it was approximately 6 months between the time that Diddy's residence was raided and the indictment was returned by the grand jury. You can also expect that the investigation was going for some time before they had the evidence to get the search warrant to raid his residence. And I would also say that it is pretty much always the case that the prosecutors will continue to investigate even after indictment all the way up until trial. SDNY has deep experience in these high-profile sex trafficking cases. So while I think that it might be in his interest to push the pace if they think that the government is not ready, I would also caution that based on the way they investigate and prosecute cases, they have probably put an extraordinary amount of time into this investigation before getting the indictment.
You know, one of the things, Jason, that I have found really fascinating here is the Cassie video is so incendiary that when you watch it, it is hard to view Diddy in any way other than just monstrous. And what I'm wondering is, what if the defense goes into court and says, look, this is so prejudicial that he couldn't get a fair trial because the jury will say game over, and that they'll try to keep it out that because it's too prejudicial. So two questions. One is, would that fly before the trial judge? And two, if he's convicted, does that make the Southern District of New York vulnerable on appeal?
What I would say here, though, is that you're right. It is an incendiary video, and it may seem prejudicial, but usually the best evidence of somebody's guilt is the most prejudicial. For example, you know, if you have a murder case and you have pictures of the victim after having been shot or their body recovered, that's often very prejudicial because it's very good proof of what actually happened, and that type of evidence.
But he's not being prosecuted for the video because A, it's a state crime, and B, the statute of limitations is run.
That's right. But just because you're not being prosecuted for something doesn't mean that a particular item could not be evidence used for purposes of your case. So you're allowed to bring in, for example, prior bad acts. You're allowed to bring in evidence that could be seen as part of an overall scheme that could go towards somebody's MO. There are a number of different provisions in the federal rules of evidence that allow for evidence of acts, even if they're not being charged and even if they're not being prosecuted here, to come in. And in particular here, what I would point out is that because this is a racketeering indictment, right? Racketeering indictments and racketeering conspiracies are incredibly broad, and they allow prosecutors to get in an incredibly broad amount of evidence that could include, for example, state crimes, and could include things that happened that aren't part of the charged acts.
Yeah.
If you were on the other side, what would be the best strategy to take this on then? Are there any holes that you can see, at least at this point, in the case that the feds have presented?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say at this point in time. Obviously, there's going to be I would imagine there would be an extraordinary amount of discovery that's produced in this case to Diddy's lawyers. And if he's set on going to trial, then there's going to be a lot of work for his defense lawyers to comb through witness statements, the evidence that they've collected, the way in which they've collected that evidence, to see what exactly the government is going to prove at trial, what's their story is going to be, and how corroborated their witnesses are. Because that's really one of the most important things, and something that SDNY does very well. They get a lot of evidence to make sure that when a witness is on the stand testifying, there's other evidence like records, photographs, things found in a search that corroborate what they're saying, such that they then say to the jury, you don't even have to take their word for it. They're telling you about something, and look, we found this other piece of evidence that proves they're telling you the truth.
One of the things the defense lawyer told us, and a couple of other lawyers as well, is that the defense will make hay out of the fact that a lot of people, including Cassie, first went to a civil lawyer and not the police, and went to a civil lawyer asking for money. How does that play before a jury?
Well, I think what I would say about that is that there are always going to be opportunities to impeach the credibility of witnesses. But I do think, in particular, in cases where the allegations are sexual abuse, there's a lot of well-documented evidence regarding the way in which people react to having been victims of sexual abuse or alleged victims of sexual abuse. And if you're a defense lawyer, you probably want to tread a little bit carefully when you're thinking about how you want to impeach somebody who's testifying about that kind of conduct, because there may be avenues to score points with the jury, but I think you also have to be careful that you don't look like you are trying to re-victimize an individual or beat up on them on the stand.
Gotta say, we're so lucky to have found you because you've got that knowledge base. I hope you will come back as we continue talking about this case. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
He knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good perspective on
Yep.
it.